The last 5 years have been great for horror. There have been excellent entries in every subgenre, big-name blockbusters and little indie darlings. I decided to do a top 10 list of my favorites from the last half-decade. Now, of course, this is incredibly subjective, and I'm sure no one else will have the same list as I do, but I'd be interested to hear others' opinions. Number 10 is Terrifier 2. This franchise sprung up somewhat out of nowhere. From a single segment in an otherwise unremarkable anthology to a pretty crappy original film, to now being one of the most recognizable villains of the 2010s. Art has become a mainstay at conventions and on merchandise, and it's because of this film. Now, is it overly long, and does it set up a mythology that doesn't totally make sense? Yes, but it also has a lot of fun kills, and more just Art being his usual violent, goofy self. I did an edit of this film a few years back that took out more than half an hour, and I think it's better for it. While Terrifier 3 has improved in the runtime department, its story beats are much worse, and it felt like a chunk of it was missing. When I first saw Mad God, I did not particularly like it. I appreciated it, I saw what it was going for, but given its fairly non-existent story and lack of characters, I found it a hard watch. I still think those are problems, but ultimately the sheer audacity of it, the visuals and the idea behind it more than make up for any other issues. For those unfamiliar, it was a stop-motion film created on and off for 30 years by Phil Tippett. All of the designs were created by him, although he had volunteers assist with the actual production. It's an experience more than a movie, but it's a hell of a ride. The Invisible Man is number 8, and it was a surprise when it arrived. Just a few years after Tom Cruise's disastrous Mummy movie, this seemed like another cheap cash grab, but it was anything but. A well-made tale of abuse and gaslighting that could make a completely empty scene terrifying. A lot of it comes down to Elizabeth Moss's performance as the protagonist. Not the titular Invisible Man, but one of his victims. A reframing that elevates the whole production. Sure, the suit is basically magic, and the ending is a little weaker than the rest, but it's a great modern take on a classic idea. Bring Her Back is the most recent film on this list, but it's one of the most emotionally impactful. I enjoyed the director's previous effort, Talk to Me, but found it lacking catharsis. This film addresses that criticism and delivers a waking nightmare. Largely a reflection on grief, it is another film elevated by its performances. The cast is small, effectively just 4 people, but each plays their part perfectly. The only real complaint I have is thematically it's a little unfocused. While the grief idea is at the forefront, there are a few others that feel aimless in the background, and that detracts slightly from the story. The Substance is probably the film that had the biggest impact on this list, even though I have it here at number 6. There was buzz for an Oscar nomination, and a huge amount of praise at horror awards. A modern body horror picture without how Hollywood treats aging women. It accomplishes everything that it sets out to do. The third act is certainly what it was most talked about, as that's when it takes off from any semblance of reality and embraces the grotesque, but it works on every level. There's so much symbolism in the film, great use of colors and references, and an amazing descent into debauchery. Bones and All at Fifth is ultimately kind of a romance, despite the cannibalism. It's a sweet, touching story about how our differences can leave us isolated in the modern world. It's very sappy, and certainly not for everyone, but in this sort of emerging coming-of-age cannibalism subgenre, it's the best. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is the funniest horror film of the last decade. The final twist, the joke that makes the whole film really work, genuinely feels so brilliant and unexpected. Some will be put off by the dialogue, and it's certainly heavily inspired by Gen Z, but it doesn't feel like someone attempting to ape the current generation. It feels authentic. There are many touches that show the care and characterization, like the different light sources everyone uses once the power goes off, which help make us care about these people, even though they're all terrible in one way or another. It really feels like the ultimate successor to Scream, better than the modern sequel's Backcountry Mile. The Night House is a great film with an incredible performance by Rebecca Hall, who always delivers. The imagery is what sets it apart from other haunted house capers, as well as the subject matter. It also has some of the best jump scares out there, which is difficult to do when there have been almost a century of them. It also calls back to one of the oldest horror tropes, that nothing is the scariest thing of all. I already put out a video on this one a few years ago, but it is truly spectacular. I saw the TV Glow as a very specific mood. Some even say that it's not horror, but it's made me feel more existential dread than any other film on this list. In addition to the obvious trans allegory, it's also about unfulfilled potential, the worry that at some point in your life you made the wrong choice and now it's too late. Ultimately, despite that idea being grim, the film ends with hope, that there is still time to make the change you need in order to make yourself happy, but you have to go for it to take the leap. There have been many films described as Lynchian, but this one truly succeeds where others have failed. The soundtrack, the use of color, the ambiguous nature of the plot, all contribute to the dreamlike nature. It's true, not a lot goes on, but it's a character study. It's about feelings and emotions rather than events, so that's not even a real negative. Pearl is my number 1 film, but it's close. It's part of Ti West's X trilogy, and it's the most unique of the set. X was a standard slasher with a few strong thematic ideas about growing old, and Maxine was an unfortunate disaster of a giallo impression. Pearl is a character study, set in the 1920s and made to look like a Technicolor production from the 40s. Pearl herself is again played by Mia Goth, and she is a character that is both reprehensible and pitiable. We understand her, but it doesn't justify the action she takes. Then of course there's the monologue at the end. 7 odd minutes laying out her life for Missy, describing her pain, her aches, her dreams, and also her darkness. Horror rarely has good monologues, with its monosyllabic villains and short run times, but it fits perfectly here. It's a film that gets everything right from start to finish, and is truly the best of the last 5 years. But, like I said, that's just my opinion. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and let me know your thoughts. And then, as always, be well.